thanks, Jan, for the introduction. And I have to say, it's a bit cruel to give the Spaniard the after-lunch spot. So essentially, my job in the next 20 minutes is to keep you fighting that siesta time, talking about brands and talking about brands building. Because when we think about the future of digital advertising, frankly, I think it's impossible to think about that future without digital advertising really playing a role on building brands. Now, the first question that might come up is, why are brands important? And I feel really, really passionate about brands, and they are important for a reason. What you can see in this chart is 4 lines. The first line is the top 10 most valuable brands according to the Kantar ranking. The second line is what makes the remainder 90 brands that make up the top 100 most valuable global brands. Again, Kantar ranking. And what makes that Kantar ranking special is it's the only ranking that takes into account consumer sentiment, what people think of those brands, what they feel of those brands, in terms of giving them their value. The third line is the S&P 500, which, as you know, is the 500 most powerful brands in the US. And the MSCI is a similar index, but including companies in Europe as well as in Asia. And the first thing that you see, if you look since 2006, which is since we've been doing this work, the brands with a better connection with consumers, the brands for which consumers feel they are meaningful, they are different, and they are salient to them, grow much faster than the rest of the brands. But also what is really important is when a crisis hits, and what you can see, the white line basically there is index at 100. When the financial crisis happened, all the indexes went below growth. But the strong brands with a strong connection with consumers, they recover within a year. The other 2 indexes took 2 to 3 years to lead back to growth. And of course, we are seeing, and we saw, a similar impact when COVID hit. Now, that happens for a very simple reason. Brands that are meaningful, that are different, and that they are salient, they drive good business performance. What you can see here is the brands that over-index on all those 3 elements drive 9 times the value share in the market today. We call it predisposition or demand power, that brands that are not as strong on those indexes. And part of that is because they are able to command a price premium as well. So brands that are strong in consumers' mind can charge as much as twice what brands that are not so strong can do. And finally, and this is really important when thinking about advertising as well, is we look at one point of time, brands that are very, very meaningful, different and salient. What was their progress, their performance in 2 years? And those brands are 4 times more likely to grow than brands that aren't. So I think investing in brand, and anybody could or should agree to that, is good business practice. And investing in brand today essentially means investing in a digital world. This is the share of spend according to Group M in 2023. Granted, it includes search, but even if you exclude search, still the share of spend of digital will be 60% this year. And we even went and asked marketeers. Last year, we asked 1,000 marketeers, how are they planning to invest on different channels during 2023? Where will they invest more? Where will they invest less? And what you can see here is the top 4 in terms of the biggest investment. 3 of them are video channels, which are formats that are going to be very conducive to brand building. And video is obviously changing. Marketeers are telling us they're still going to spend on TV. There's still growth expected with the growth of the advertising industry. But obviously, the dollars are going to shift massively to TV streaming. And as video has been the key theme in digital, and it's been so in the smallest screen, suddenly we have video coming back in the biggest screen. Again, a format that is great for brand building. But also on the top 4, there is e-commerce. So while clients will continue to spend on the point of sale, as you can see there, the physical point of sale, obviously the investment in e-commerce is going to be disproportionately higher in terms of growth. And it is in this dilemma between brand building and performance advertising that I'm going to spend the rest of the 15 minutes. And it is essentially asking the question or answering the question of where does brand performance meet brand building in a digital world? And it all starts with a not very fun topic, but it's a real topic, which is it all starts by understanding the right returns. I've been in quite a few of the talks this week and hearing people, and the more we continue to talk about digital advertising in terms of immediate behavioral metrics, things like click-throughs, things like likes, things like the number of followers, the more we might be distancing ourselves of having digital really building brand. What you can see here is the correlation between click-through rates and brand awareness. And even if you're not a statistician, I can tell you the correlation is 0. So just think about it. And by the way, it's the same correlation with associations, brand imagery, or with motivation. So just think about it. If we are optimizing a spend, or if we have targets, or we talk about the success of a digital campaign based on their click-through rates, which I've still seen in this conference, we're actually not really building, or we are not really having an impact on brand. And maybe there are not many believers because we don't have a full room here, but just to give you evidence of why this is so important, even in the most performance-driven channel, which is e-commerce. Stackline is a business in the US that actually looks at all the e-commerce platform in the US and brings out insights. And they concluded that 64% of any search on e-commerce starts with a branded search. So just again, think about it. 2/3 of people going into e-commerce with a brand already in mind. And frankly, a lot of advertisers are starting to take note and drive change. Adidas, a few years back, came out and said, they have been over-relying on marketing mix modeling, explaining short-term sales to drive their channel investment. And they have put a disproportionate amount of money on performance marketing. And guess what happens? Their sales have started to decline. Even direct-to-consumer brands like ASOS or Airbnb are saying they need brand building activity to grow their user base. And it is quite simple. If you just actually drive user base through performance marketing, you are hitting the same people all the time, so you won't grow it. Now, that happens for a very simple reason. It happens because marketing investment and advertising is part of that. Of course, it has a direct impact on sales, especially if we have promos and another type of activity. But marketing investment and advertising also has an impact on what people think about brands, the opinions that they shape, the feelings that they provoke. And I can guarantee you, you are all consumers, as much as I do, that what you think of brands or what you feel about brands has a direct impact on your sales today. Not in 20 years' time, not in 2 years' time, not in the future. This whole short and long, it really frustrates me a little bit. What people think about brands influences their brand choices today. And therefore, unless you have that balance on the way you look at the returns, most of the digital advertising might still be very performance-driven. And by doing that, I honestly think we're doing a disservice to the entire industry. I'm going to show you some data. It's aggregated data of our marketing mix models. And essentially, when you look at them aggregated across industries, what we can say is that advertising has a direct impact on around 13% of their sales. Or in other words, 13% of their sales are explained by what people are doing in terms of advertising. But if we at the other angle, if we understand what is the impact that advertising is having on brands, and therefore what is the impact that brands are having on sales, suddenly that becomes 15%. Just imagine the difference. Just imagine the difference of being able to say our advertising investment is driving 28% of our sales as opposed to saying 13% of our sales. And even in a channel like digital that historically has been used primarily for performance-driven advertising, a third of the sales that are driven by digital are still driven by the impact that digital is having on brand. So if we're talking about balance and the importance of building brand and the impact that it has in sales, I guess the next question, especially to an industry of channels, is where? And that is where I'm going to the second point, which is the right places. And there is a reason why places is in plural, and you'll see why I mean that. But the first thing in terms of selecting channels when you think about brand building is really understanding what is the ad receptivity from a consumer point of view to those channels. What you can see here is if people are more receptive to advertising in certain channels, the impact of those campaigns on those channels is significantly higher in terms of moving brand metrics. In other words, just because you can be there is not enough reason for you to be there. And these are the top 5 channels when we look at the digital channels in Germany in terms of ad receptivity. And of course, what we are not saying is that brands will only use these 5 channels in digital in Germany, because each of these channels have a high ad receptivity for different reasons. In the case of Amazon, people see this channel as relevant and useful when they are needing to make decisions. In the case of Der Spiegel, I hope I've pronounced that well, is because it's a very trusted channel. So the important thing is understand what is the role that each channel plays, and therefore what is the type of advertising or the type of messages that we want to be delivering on them. Because one thing is for sure when it comes to choosing channels, and is the more, the merrier. You have here 3 segments of campaigns. You have campaigns that we measure that tend to use 1 or 2 channels to drive that, campaigns that we measure that use between 3 and 4 channels, and campaigns that use more than 5 channels. The first group, and by the way, we've normalized the spend, so taking out the level of spend out of those campaigns. What you can see on the first one is the impact on brand index at 100. And what you can see is campaigns that use 5 or more channels have 3 times the brand impact that campaigns that use 1 or 2. And the reason is quite simple. First of all, you manage to drive more reach through multi-channel campaigns. But the second reason, which is really important, is channels work together. We call that synergies, the power of how channels can complement each other and work together. This is the impact of synergy on campaigns in terms of brand uplift, pre-COVID and post-COVID. And as you can see, the impact of more than one channel working together with another channel on brand is growing, and is nearly already 50%. And that is why it's so critical to really understand what is the role of each channel. Again, this is based on our database of campaigns. What you can see at the top is the distribution of a spend. Obviously, in our case, clients tend to test with our more TV-driven campaigns, so that's why you can see it's 29% of the share. But TV tends to play a hell of a lot more on awareness, on driving awareness when it comes to brand, than on driving the bottom side of the funnel. However, digital, which is about 30% of the share of the spend on those campaigns, actually over-index massively in building associations and in driving motivation. So the key theme then, and the key question then becomes, if more channels the merrier, if asking or having channels working together in terms of synergies has a great impact on brand building, what brings them all together? And that is the third point of my presentation, and probably the one, frankly, I feel the most passionate about, which is the right content. And I feel the most passionate about because we spend most of our lives talking about channels. And in reality, when we talk about campaigns, what makes the biggest difference to whether a campaign is successful in driving brand is the quality of the creative. And again, just think about it. As professionals, how much time do we spend talking about the creative strategy and the creative quality in a campaign, and how much do we spend talking about how are we distributing that across channels? It's certainly not 50-50. And it is important because with a lot of A/B testing in the industry, we need to realize that creative quality is not only a magnifier, it can also have a negative effect on brand. These are thousands of digital campaigns that we test in the US, and the bottom 20% of those campaigns actually have a negative impact on brand. And the main driver of that is creative. Now, the power of having a strong creative strategy is that, as I said before, it helps you to stitch things together. It helps you to bring things together. Again, 3 segments of campaigns, all of them multimedia campaigns that you can see here. The first one were campaigns where the creatives across the different channels weren't very well integrated. The second one is what I call the copy and paste strategy. So you took your 30-second TV ad and pasted it in Facebook, but at least the look and feel was the same. And the third one is what I call ensuring there is a continuity on the style of the advertising and what we are doing, but the creative is built for the context, right? And what you can see here is, again, normalizing a spend, campaigns that actually stitch things together, have a creative idea that flies across all the channels, and that they build for the context are 60% more effective than campaigns that don't, right? So a key question then will be, what makes a good creative or a good content strategy? And the first thing, in my opinion, that makes a good content strategy is it needs to rely on a strong creative idea, something that is well-rooted on the brand and what the brand wants to stand for, but is a strong creative idea that you can actually apply at many different touch points or channels. Then obviously that creative idea needs to be delivered in an engaging way, in a really engaging way. Things that people can actually remember is what we call create lasting impressions. But frankly, none of us are in the world of advertising for the sake of creativity, which means, obviously, those lasting impressions need to be extremely well integrated to the brand. Now, I'm going to finish my presentation, and you'll be very happy to know that it won't even take 25 minutes, with an example. And as you can guess from my name, I'm a Spaniard, I'm in Germany, and I'm going to talk to you about an English brand. And I'm going to be talking to you about tea. And the reason I've been back from Asia, living in the UK for the last 2 years, and I think this story is just fascinating. I put that in big because I really struggle to pronounce that, being a Spaniard, but it's basically Yorkshire tea. And the fascinating thing about this story is that tea in the UK is a religion, right? And what that also means is the habits built with brands are pretty difficult to break. And Yorkshire tea was brand number 3 in the UK. Now, again, what I love of this story, and you should Google it, you should hear the CMO, Dom White, talking about this because he's fascinating. What I love about it is it all started with digital conversations. Dom White, who is today the CMO, he actually was a digital brand person. And he started seeing through Twitter conversations that expats living in the US, British expats living in the US, were absolutely missing their proper cup of tea. So he started with some digital engagements based on that. Fast forward a couple of years, and they came up with this position and with this creative idea based on proper tea. Now, then they went and they delivered that in very light humor. They use celebrities from Yorkshire all the time. And they use digitally brilliantly to be constantly relevant and contemporary to what was happening in the market. So they, for example, I don't know if you can see the picture well, but when people went back to office after COVID and they had to have the social distancing, they did this whole campaign with this teapot, very large teapot for social distancing, which is brilliant. You should look at it. They talk about, they launch a new version with the tea Lioness tea, the English football team, female English football team, obviously had a lot of traction. So using digital to be very contemporary. But the third point to me, honestly, is what most marketeers tend to miss. Because in marketing, we love shiny stuff. And what that means is after 3 months, we get bored with an idea and we want a new idea. But what these guys did really well, they were first of all super consistent with that strategy across channels, but they were also super consistent with that strategy across time. Now, the result is that we could see in our data that, has great ads, grew for them 44 points for a period of 2 years. Saliency, people remembering the brand grew up 27% over the period of 2 years. Now, the great thing also about talking about content is that you always get a bit of time to show a couple of ads. So what I'm going to show you is the two of their ads. I mean, they did many. They were on social. But there is literally 3 years between these two ads.
Morning, all. Morning. Brothers, sisters, today a great legacy rests upon your shoulders. Because here, we make more than just tea. We make proper brews. Brews that bring a tear to your eye and warmth to your soul. So go out there and do it for each other. Do it for yourselves, but most of all, do it for Yorkshire! Oh, and the fire drill's Thursday at 3.
Yorkshire tea, where everything's done proper.
Let's see if this works.
Well, Tina, it's sad that you're leaving us, but before you go, Patrick has a few words. Where's Patrick?
Ah, Tina. The void so hollow that you shall leave. The emptiness felt within these walls, where only the soft weeping of the forgotten reverberates. Shall we not hear again the enchanting echoes of your laughter, or the sweet rasp of your stapler? We must and will continue. Our love, our dreams, our wishes ride with you, fair Tina.
And we're having a pint at the Dog and Trumpet after work.
Apparently there's a tab behind the bar.
Yorkshire tea, where everything's done proper.
Again, 3 years in between the two ads, you can see how consistently they kept the delivery. And obviously, the final punchline is that they actually grew 21% in British position, and they went from number 3 brand to number 1 brand in tea in the UK with 33% market share, right? Pretty difficult thing to do. So in summary, we believe brand is a massive driver of sales today, not tomorrow, not in the future, today. And digital advertising is a massive force to drive it, but we need to act and think differently. Part of that acting and think differently is you need to plan for reach, not just targeting. And you need to look at multi-channels and how the different channels work to really make the most of it together with context. And finally, quality of creative, context and consistency is your best way to drive better backs for your investment and is the best way to bring it all together. So with that, we have, I guess, 5 minutes for questions.
Okay, once again, please raise your hand if you have any questions. We're having trouble with the app. Yeah, please. Just hold on a second, please.
In regards to synergies between channels, which channels complement each other the best, or what to look for there to get the most synergies?
Yeah, we see a lot of synergies between TV and social, for example. So a lot of synergies between TV, YouTube, and Facebook. But we also see synergies between social channels quite a bit. I think the synergies, for example, with point of sale and e-commerce are not strong right now. So there's an opportunity there. Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, Gonzalo, I actually have a question for you, because we heard you talk about the importance of creative content, multi-channel, optimizing brand metrics, and so on. What do you think really makes a great creative?
Well, I touched based on that a bit on the presentation, but essentially, as I said, I mean, we tend to think of, three or two really simple things, because it all starts with a strategy. A good creative strategy allows you to stretch that creative both across channels, but also across time. But the second thing, as I said, it needs to be delivered with engagement. And actually, as an industry, I don't think we use humor enough, for example. Humor is a great way for people to remember things. I don't think we use emotions a lot, especially on digital. And it's a great thing to engage with people and to make things more memorable. But the most important thing that makes a huge creative, in my opinion, or a great creative is just do this test. If you can describe a creative without mentioning the brand, it's a bit of a challenge. But if there is no way you can describe a creative without mentioning the brand, that is a great creative because it's really well branded.
Okay, Gonzalo, thank you so much for your talk.
Thank you.
If there's no more questions in the audience.
Thanks.